Joining us now, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. We've got lots to discuss. You've been critical of the president's decision to pull back, but the president says this planned strike would not have been a proportional response. So why do you believe his assessment is wrong?
So that's a judgment call that the president has every right to make. I actually think the president has every right to not strike Iran. Obviously, it's a decision where I think it's unfortunate. I think at a bare minimum, you should lose whatever asset you shot down this $200 million drone. This isn't like what you fly in your backyard. This is the size of, I think, basically an airliner, $200 million, the value of about 10 F-16s in value. And you should at least lose that at a bare minimum, and maybe any radar stations feeding into it. I think that's a proportional response. I respect the president's decision. What I think has been the problem today is not so much that he didn't decide to strike, it's the way in which this all played out. The fact that it was reported, and he admitted that there was about 10 minutes between when the strike was going to happen, and then found out the number of casualties. There's questions there. So I don't think anybody should have a doubt that if Iran does something again, there will be enough pressure on the president to have a pretty robust retaliation, much bigger than I think was even planned this time. But how this whole thing played out, I think, could invite potential, attacks from other areas.
Well, you know the military. You're an Air Force Reserve officer. Do you believe it's credible that earlier in the day, when the members of the Joint Chiefs and others laid out the military operation, they didn't explain to the president the potential for casualties?
No, that's certainly hard for me to believe. I also think, though, he may not have fully comprehended that at that moment. I've never had to make a decision like a president of the United States, like this decision, that would actually take away a significant number of life and be a big decision. And I don't know what goes through a president's head when they're making that. It's obviously got to be something that really weighs on their shoulders. And this issue really pressured the president and got him to a point where he reversed the decision. Again, I don't begrudge him for it. I think it was an incorrect decision, but I don't begrudge him for that. We'll see what happens now with sanctions and economic pressure. The problem is how publicly this played out, and it seemed very whipsaw to a lot of people.
If 150 Iranians, and let's say they were members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as opposed to civilians, let's say 150 Iranian troops died in a U.S. strike carried out by the U.S. military, wouldn't that have raised the very serious risk of then further Iranian escalation against the United States, potentially leading to a full-scale war?
It's certainly possible, but here's where it's important to have a big, robust military option backing a small strike. So the president, evidently, it sounds like, had gotten a message to the Iranian government as the strike was underway. I think a good message would have been, this is going to be very limited and measured if this happened. And then any response beyond this will actually result in a not measured, not proportional, but a devastating response. And at that point, Iran has a decision to make. Right now, I think what they're doing is pushing this up to the line where they think they can just come shy of a response and not cross over to that. People that are arguing that Iran wants us to attack, honestly, they don't know what they're talking about, to be quite frank. Iran doesn't want us to attack, but they do want to appear as if they're an equal to the president, to panic everybody into the United States and into Europe to pressure us back into this deal.
The president, as you know, he campaigned on keeping the United States out of new war, as he was really going after earlier administrations for the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war. He promised he would never do anything that he called so stupid and so awful, costing trillions of dollars and tens of thousands of lives. In this particular case, was he simply keeping his promise to avoid a new war?
I don't know. Again, I don't begrudge the president's final decision, but he also did pledge to protect the United States of America. Now, we can argue about, what does that include? But that has to be a forward-leaning defensive posture of American troops, American assets, and American allies. And he's got some people in his ear. I don't know if he's listening to them or not, but some in kind of the more libertarian side of our party that think that any military action is automatically an invasion of 300,000 troops in Iran. It's a false choice. It is a straw man. There are all kinds of different escalating things you can do to keep it both small. I mean, your prior guest last hour, you were talking about, I think it was Operation Desert Fox that President Clinton did. There were escalating strikes, which ultimately brought Hussein back to the table. So those kinds of things are option. It's not a endless 300,000 person invasion. Nobody's advocated for that.
That's an important point. Let me get your thoughts on a different sensitive issue right now. The news that federal immigration officials are planning to arrest and deport some 2,000 migrant families in 10 cities starting this weekend. What do you make of these planned raids?
I don't know a lot of detail about them, but look, if you have an order to leave the country, you're here illegally, this is what happens. You can't overstay. If the court gives you an order that says you are basically now not allowed to be in the United States of America, you have to expect that at some point you are going to be removed from the United States of America. It's a sensitive topic. I'm actually very much a supporter of comprehensive immigration reform, so solving both the border and all the other immigration issues we have. But I think this idea that you can be ordered to leave the United States of America and it'll never be enforced, I think that's really a new phenomenon that people are arguing for. I don't think it's unreasonable at all. Again, the devil's going to be in the details of this, which I don't know. But just in hearing that, if you get an order to leave, you have to expect to leave. Well,
comprehensive immigration reform, if it could be passed in the House and the Senate and signed into law by the president, you would support it. A lot of people would welcome that as well. Congressman Kinzinger, thanks so much for joining us.
You bet, Wolf. Thanks.